You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact, the Star Trek The Next Generation intro cast that always has regular episodes in your podcast provider every single week. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This time we have been watching Legacy. It first aired the week of October 29th, 1990. It was written by Joe Menosky and directed by Robert Shearer. James, what happens in this one?
Star Trek Legacy is a 2006 real-time tactics space combat video game for Microsoft Windows, developed by Mad Dog Software and published by
James. It's not that Legacy.
But we've all spent the last 2 months playing Star Trek Legacy, haven't we? I've got 12 pages of notes here on Star Trek Legacy. I've got all of the achievements.
I mean, it's not that we've not done it.
I've not done it.
No, we've not done it.
So what's this podcast about?
Yeah, the season 4 episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, the one of Tasha Yar's sister in it.
Oh, that Legacy. But you should have been more clear. That's all I'm saying. Otherwise I wouldn't have spent the last 2 months playing Star Trek Legacy.
Well, I've spent the last 2 months watching Legacy on a loop because I just love this episode so much. But did you happen to have a synopsis to hand, even though your whole brain is imbued with a Star Trek tactical game?
I do have a synopsis at hand. The Enterprise answers a distress call from a Federation freighter which is orbiting the planet Tarkana 4, the home of former security chief Tasha Yar. They race to get there, but the ship explodes. But their escape pod makes it to the planet. Unfortunately, the planet is ruled by 2 warring factions, and the crewmen are being held hostage by the Alliance. Beaming down to the surface, the Enterprise forms an alliance with the Coalition, whose members include one Ishara Yar. She is assigned as liaison to the Enterprise, and wins the trust of many of her bravery, particularly Data, who encourages her to stay on the Enterprise. But can she be trusted? And will the missing crewman we don't care about ever be rescued?
Well, that is the big question. The answer to which is yes, incidentally, but that doesn't really have much bearing on the episode. But anyway, all that for later. Alex, you've never seen this episode before, so tell me, what did you think of it?
Well, I mean, I have seen it before because for a little bit of inside baseball, we meant to record this podcast about 3 months ago, but then we weren't able to. So we had watched the episode and then had to watch it again, which you would think would make me doubly prepared for this. It has not. I remembered very little beyond a hairdo and the phrase a machine built for fighting, and my thought at the time of, no, built for loving. And they went, oh no, that is where they're going with it. Oh no, they're not. Well, ish. It's finished.
I mean, you mentioned the haircut there, which is memorable. Very much party in the front and party in the back. An interesting approach for a mullet. The thing I had forgotten, which is surprising, is that they dress their guest, Ishara, in a body stocking, essentially, which very much shows the curvature of her arse. I would say there is in the TNG era a propensity to put women in very tight-fitting clothing, and that's somewhat problematic, especially in HD. You see more outlines than you'd really need to.
Though, to be fair, that did also happen with Jonathan Frakes.
Well,
I genuinely thought you were going to say there's a propensity to have them in tight-fitting clothing, and I'm all for that.
Anyway, onto the episode. That first opening scene, a big game of poker, where both Data and Riker, they're playing the game, and they've taken the majority of the chips. Worf is terrible. Troi is clearly terrible, despite having some kind of advantage, you'd think. And then Riker does a card trick, but Data sees right through it. And I'm not sure what this is saying. That the setup of the episode is that Data's no longer naive. Data can understand human actions and deceptions. Is that what they're trying to set up there? Or did the episode just come in short and they had to have quite a long scene of poker?
It's that ultimately what Data is looking for in this episode is to poker.
This feels like your normal Star Trek The Next Generation opening, in that it sets up what the episode is going to be about. It's going to be about Data and in how he can be bluffed. This is setting up the idea that the Riker can no longer bluff him, but then you have this connection to his past, and that does bluff him. It builds up to the audience that he is no longer naive, whereas he still is. He has a way to go.
But it sounds like such a terrible games night, doesn't it? I mean, they say themselves that the game has been entirely dominated by Riker and Data, and Data's there going, well, actually, it's not a magic trick. I saw that you thumbed the card, and therefore we're able to... Oh, right, Jesus, what a party pooper. It's like going to the theatre, watching a dramatic murder scene, and having the person next to you saying, he's not really dead. It's a thing called acting. I mean, next time, all I'm saying is, if you're going to bring a machine, next time, bring a tease made. It's going to bring more to the party. So
a distress call interrupts that game because it was just really building up to something exciting. I think that's the least tense distress call that I've ever encountered. Even though they increase the speed to warp 9.6, it's very difficult to care about this one. They cut to O'Brien. Can you get them, O'Brien? No, there's an explosion. But I don't know, it just feels very...
Why don't they jump straight to 9.6? If they can go 9.6, why not go at 9.6? Why not go at 9.7?
Well, that's true of all of the episodes, isn't it? I mean, the fact that speed is essentially just meaningless. It never seems to have any bearing on anything.
I mean, they say at warp 9.3, they're 7 minutes away. How far are they at 9.6? And if he had just gone up to 9.65, would they have got there in time? Because, I mean, they exploded literally within seconds of them arriving. It was very poor timing from them.
They would have done, but the coffee cups would just sort of slide about a little bit. It's hell for stains.
They said they had 3 minutes to get to them.
And of course, it's the planet Tasha Yar came from. That's mentioned quite early.
Which looks like a sort of abandoned tube station. I've got to say, I particularly enjoyed the slightly shit dressing of the set to try and make it look as if it was more impressive than it was by taking the studio floor, putting a bit of dirt on it, and then putting some grating on it to make it look as if it was raised up and it was void underneath. But no, it is just some metal grating, and it's really obviously just some metal grating.
What I thought as soon as I saw it was, oh, they've gone to the industrial zone in the Crystal Maze. and then later on, you've got that cross-section. So the entire planet colony is in a sort of metal mountain, a sort of a pyramid where they all live, and they're all got sort of laser tag beacons on them, and if they approach a certain thing, the alarms go off. And yet, on this entire planet, where there's apparently one structure where everybody lives, that's where the escape pod landed. Now, I might be getting a bit nitpicker's guide, because obviously that's what you need for the story to work, but it seems very silly. Maybe the escape pod seeks out the nearest civilization, and that's a useful feature, but planets are big, everybody.
I seem to remember it looking better in season 1. Was it Harding Q where we saw a little bit?
It did some dark sewage tunnels, I think.
It was generally darker. The lighting was a lot lower.
Yeah, it did not look like a laser tag facility.
It doesn't help with heavy studio lighting. The fact that essentially all of the guest stars, apart from one, are essentially dressed in brown and white.
Do you know, on this occasion, I think I would have preferred the biker gear rather than sort of the leader of the coalition being like 80s sitcom dad.
What it made me think of is, you know, you go to a fancy dress shop and there's sort of two tiers. You can get the expensive fancy dress and then the not so good one, which is like a pair of trousers with the boots just sort of printed onto the trouser. And I was looking at it thinking, that's what that looks like, a sort of cheap Star Wars version of that.
Before we get there, they have the discussion to send down an away team. Worf's very concerned about Dr. Crusher going down. His line, Lieutenant Yar spoke of rape gangs. Frankly, she couldn't speak of much else. I am astounded they brought that up again.
It doesn't seem right for Season 4 Next Generation.
I mean, I know that is the one thing we know about this planet. One, she had a cat, and two, there were rape gangs. But it just...
It never gets old, does it?
She spoke very fondly of the cat.
I think you could have got the point. Violent gangs or something like that. I think naming them rape gangs just sort of... I'm not sure if that was their entire purpose, those gangs.
They're usually more subtle now.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the planet itself, though, I think this is an interesting idea. It's an Earth colony that's cut itself off from the Federation. I think you're starting to get the kind of ideas that were present in Deep Space Nine, where you're on the edge of the Federation and there's a lot of people rejecting those ideals and saying that their freedoms are being curbed by the Federation. You don't get any of that here. But in terms of the actual overall ideal that there are people who don't want to live under that particular rule, you have the foundation of that on this planet, but just done incredibly badly.
Certainly at this point, and you could perhaps argue later as well, not anything to particularly draw you in, and there is a little bit of a sense of, we've been here, done this. And if you're revisiting a character, and I mean we're not really revisiting. It's a weird one, isn't it? Because in a way we sort of are revisiting Tasha Yar without her ever being present, and yet we aren't doing anything new with it, really.
It's slightly interesting. I mean, not massively interesting. That she basically gets more depth and more prominence in an episode than she ever did when she was actually a series regular on the show. And it seems every year she gets something a bit more interesting to do without actually being there. I mean, I'm all for revisiting stuff, but I feel you could have left Tasha Yar in the past.
And this whole relationship with Data, that's all based around one accidental bout of sex.
There was no friendship there, as far as I can recall. I mean, I don't go and revisit these episodes often, but I don't feel like there was really anything to suggest that, other than that thing they did, which was kind of a joke, that there was any great bond there. And I think it's an almost romantic subplot with Data, but it's also really creepy, because if you're that guy whose lover has died and then you meet their sister and you're projecting all those feelings onto her, encouraging her to stay and just following her around and saying, I'd like to give you some inputs, that's just... if it wasn't an android, it would be a pretty creepy story. And even though it is an android, it's still kind of a creepy story. I don't know if that's just the times, and I know she is obviously there manipulating him, but I don't feel the way he acts particularly endears me to him.
But I think there's also a problem in that you're saying if he wasn't an android, it'd be something else. If he wasn't an android, it would be Vertigo. But the thing that makes Vertigo interesting, with a very, very similar plot in that sense, is that because you're dealing with a very human character, a very fallible character, that there's a lot more scope for a sort of crisis of emotion and in that story, a madness setting in. With Data, you're going to very much have a one-note thing, or at best a two-note thing, one being cold and two being, I'm sensing some confusion. enough to stop you in your tracks. No, just to comment on it.
Saying that, I don't think I've ever identified with Data more when she asks him, "Are you able to have friends?" I was like, yeah, I get that a lot.
You think that's bad? In the next episode, they say, Alexander doesn't socialise much with other children. Oh, thanks a bunch.
Well, there's more broccoli episodes coming up, so we can identify more with members of the crew.
The thing is, so you have this planet, and you've got these two warring factions. I can only assume their names were put in a draft, and somebody forgot to change them. The Coalition and the Alliance. Now, that is some weak writing just there. And the thing is, we never see the other one. You get a hostage message, and you get a guy with a phaser. But it's very hard to feel any sense of scale, or any sense of actual war. I don't know if it's war, if it's just gang violence, but if the gangs are actually running the entire city, colony, pyramid, I don't know. You don't get any sense of that, because as described, that would be a civil war, but it feels very small scale, but maybe it serves its purpose.
No, I don't know. I think you're right. There's a startling lack of peril. Or at least there is peril, but none of it ever feels massively consequential.
Who is the coalition between, and who is the alliance between?
The Liberal Democrats and the Conservative Party.
I thought it was the DUP and the Tories now.
Well, that's not a formal coalition. That's just an agreement between one group and another one willing to do what they say for £1 billion.
That's the alliance, then.
So anyway, there's some weird moments in this episode. I don't know why. It's just the way they're directed, where she comes on board and they walk into the observation lounge and everyone's staring at her. And I guess that's quite nice, because there's sort of expectation placed on her. And basically the first thing they say is, you don't believe I'm her sister? I can give you a DNA sample if you want. And Dr. Crusher just goes, yes, I'd like that. As if she really loves getting DNA samples.
I thought there was something a bit menacing about that.
Oh, there really, really was.
I'll take it in my quarters.
I guess the episode kind of breaks itself down into stuff with Data, almost relationship building, which is actually, it's nice enough.
It's fine.
Yeah. And then away missions. And Ashara establishes herself as a hero, and everyone's talking about it. When they go down to do the thing with the ship, so they get the sensors to go further, and there's the thing with a thing. It's a diversion, so Geordie can fiddle about with the whatchamacallit, and then she proves herself super brave by getting shot. I wasn't quite sure how she proved herself to be super brave, but everyone goes on about it.
She's so very, very brave.
Well, it's that idea that they're all thinking of Tasha when they see her. She's manipulating them the whole time.
Well, I would go with her, but I'd be thinking of Tasha.
At any point, though, in the episode, do we as a viewer, we're not supposed to trust her, are we? Because there's the whole thing at the start, which is find out everything you can about the Enterprise. She conveniently appears, and then there's the sort of Councillor Troy's going, well, I find her a bit ambiguous, and you go, uh-huh, and then she contacts her other person, goes, it's working, and I don't know, are we ever meant to feel like there's a torn loyalty, really? Because I think, actually, it should be more. She should actually have her head turned by the Starship and the Federation and Data a bit more than I think she actually does.
Well, I mean, they are sort of playing into that slight sort of femme fatale role, aren't they? But you're right. They probably should play into that more, and then that would also fit more into that trope.
But that's the thing. It's been done before. So having a character who doesn't get turned by Starfleet, doesn't become good and then have the head turned again. Somebody who's just a bad guy the whole of the way through. Or even not necessarily a bad guy, but in this grey area. It's actually refreshing.
I think the big problem is that we as the audience are meant to get a lot of our investment from her relationship. And I think the problem is we don't care about Tasha Yar in any way.
Yeah.
I care about her a little, particularly after yesterday's Enterprise. That kind of redeemed her.
Yeah, but it also felt like kind of an end note as well. It felt like kind of a wrapping up of that character. I mean, that was part of the surprise when I got to this was, oh, we're carrying on with that. I mean, I thought we'd quite nicely wrapped it up, but...
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, well...
I mean, it was so great she got to sacrifice herself for a greater good. I mean, they wouldn't ruin that, would they?
Dear.
That's not important right now. I mean, I don't have a lot more. It's this week Data learns about betrayal, as is stated explicitly at the end of the episode.
But I'm sure it's not even the first time that's happened. Or maybe it just feels like such a normal trope I assume it has before, but I feel like we've had that before, haven't we? Data putting his trust into someone and that's not a euphemism.
This has been done in Data lore. That's when he put his trust into somebody and they betrayed him.
Well, like, it sometimes takes time to learn.
He needs to be betrayed multiple times and in much more hideous fashion.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, that's you again. But I would say overall, like, this episode is fine. I do not have much of an investment in any of it. I mean, the whole motivation for them going there, we rescued the crewmen, and they're sort of almost rescued off screen. You know, it's like, we've got them. And then they shoot off their bracelets with that new mode on the phaser. And then they're beamed up, and then they go to I don't know, like the power core to try, and she wants to blow that up for some reason, and
they have soldiers waiting to attack the Alliance.
Yes, because of the soldiers that they have in their vast army.
I know that we rely sometimes too much on the phrase "it's basically fine," but I mean there's a distinction. I mean, basically fine for Series 4 is still better than basically fine for Series 3, and my God, it's a damn sight better than Series 1 or 2. It's just an evolving concept. Clearly, in comparison to older episodes, this is much better. I mean, it's competent, and you certainly couldn't say that of some of the very earliest episodes. But the problem is that we've reached a point where we've had some particularly standout episodes. And when you sort of fall back into this, especially when it's kind of treading over plot that we've had before, and trying to make it different, we're kind of going to address this again, but it's different because we haven't actually got the actress. We've got someone that's playing her sister. You know, it feels like a sitcom where someone's demanded too much money and the next series suddenly in comes their distant relation.
Would the episode have been enhanced with a Denise Crosby cameo? Either in a flashback or a little holodeck scene where she gets to meet? Or would that just have been a bit crass, a bit, like, cheap?
I don't think it would have enhanced it. I don't think it really needed it.
It would have been very different.
The episode isn't about her sister missing Tasha.
I think that's maybe part of the thing, though, isn't it? Is that to bring in the relation of a character like that, you expect that to be a larger driving force of the story than perhaps it is here. That's not to say that it isn't, you know, a big influencer on plot, but ultimately, if you took that factor away, you could kind of still have the same story.
Actually, and another comparison to Data lore, it's kind of the same idea of the crew seeing Tasha Yar in Ishara and the crew seeing Data in lore. Except, of course, now it's competently structured because Michael Piller makes it now.
Yes. Competent. Is that the new basically fine? Competently structured.
And that will be coming on a t-shirt to a Redbubble store near you.
There's stuff we've not mentioned, like the little proximity tags and stuff like that. So basically, they can't shoplift. I mean, that sounds like it's an idea they could do more with.
I mean, it is just electronic tags. It is just like the man that came up to me in a supermarket car park the other day saying, can I have some money? There's nothing wrong with me. I'm a good person, and I've just got this tag. And then he pulled up his trousers and showed me his electronic tag. This is a detour, but I just thought I'd share.
There is a couple of references to the original series episode 10 about Intruder. So there's Camus 2, which is the planet that they visit in 10 about Intruder, and the USS Potemkin, which is also mentioned in 10 about Intruder. And this is because this is Next Generation's 80th episode. So it's now one more episode than the original series. What I'm wondering about, because I thought to myself, up to this point, if this was the last episode of Next Generation, would it have the same influence, the same impact that the original series had? Because I don't think up to this point it really would.
No. I mean, the Best of Both Worlds was a big moment for it, but I think that was almost the beginning. And it kind of had to go on from there in order to kind of find its place. I think it would still be getting reshown and rerun in syndication, but
it would be like the new Twilight Zone.
Yeah, one of those sort of 80 shows that didn't quite establish a legacy. I certainly don't think it would have gone to movies, and I don't think you would be getting a spin-off from it now. And I think so much of the importance of TNG was setting up that entire era of 1990 Star Trek, and if it ended here, that would be sad. But also, I'd just like on that point to say, if we'd done an original series podcast, we'd be done right now.
The benefit of hindsight there.
we would just have reviewed a really terrible episode, and we'd now be talking about an overly long film.
Yeah, we would have reviewed a really terrible episode, but after 7 years, we would have been done.
Somehow, I think it would have taken us longer to do the original series.
I keep track of the running time of these podcasts. I mean, bear in mind that a recording of this podcast is probably about twice the length of what you're listening to at home or on the bus or in the leisure centre. We have, in just edited terms, now talked about this for days.
I mean, the thing is, see, when we started this, we were all basically students. Now, you know, there have been marriages and children and all that kind of thing. And yet we're still doing this. We're still talking about a 30-year-old science fiction show, which was, you know, less than 25 years old when we started this.
Quickfire.
This episode was written by Joe Minosky. It was his first episode. He would go on to write for Deep Space Nine and Voyager and Star Trek Discovery. And now he's co-executive producer of The Orville, having been unceremoniously let go from Discovery's writer's room. I think right after Brian Fuller was. But anyway, that's interesting. He's got kind of a Star Trek legacy.
Well, it's been a while since we've done one of these, and they say that absence makes the heart grow and want to leave the minute you crack out the Nitpicker's Guide. But never mind, we'll have a check-in with Phil Farrand anyway. Like you, Andrew, Phil is preoccupied with the costumes, mostly.
I bet he is.
In particular, one character's. Phil says, "What is it with the crew of the Enterprise anyway?" Yes, I think we can sympathise on that point, but we'll continue. On the planet, the members of the Coalition, both male and female, wear the same type of loose-fitting, functional outfit. Yet once Ishara gets to the Enterprise, the crew makes all haste to get her changed into this tight, open brackets, and I mean really tight, close brackets, bodysuit, which shows off her every curve. None of the...
Is that a phrase?
Yeah. None of the rest of the crew, aside from the babe Councillor Troy, has to endure this type of outfit. Why does Ashara? Seems a bit sexist, doesn't it? What?
Is that what seems a bit sexist?
At least the crew made sure that Ishara's little belt and holster for her phaser were colour coordinated with her outfit. We just couldn't have a holster that clashed now, could we? We're on page 222 at this point, and I can only assume that the man has had some kind of breakdown.
According to the Star Trek Next Generation companion, which I have in my hand right now, this is an allegory on gang warfare. I mean, it's hardly West Side Story, is it?
It's not really an allegory, is it? It just is gang warfare.
You know that film, Saving Private Ryan? It's actually an allegory for war.
So it's my turn to be nitpicky, because they say that there's been no contact with Takana 4 for 6 years, and Tasha Yar died 2 years ago, yet Ishara Yar knew that Tasha Yar had died.
Maybe she just felt it.
Maybe the tar monster went and told her.
Perhaps Control sent a message.
Ishara Yar looks like Sarah Connor.
Well, that is another episode wrapped up. We have now gone beyond the original series. What a great run we've had. Next time we will be talking all about Reunion. So do join us for that. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. What's that noise coming from the cupboard? Ah, that's just Gene.
He has to be here for all of the DNA samplings.
Ignore that noise, he's just peeling hundreds of bananas very, very quickly. These are the noises of Gene Roddenberry.
No.